Radiation Safety for Healthcare Workers, presented by Astarita Associates, consultants in medical physics and radiation safety. Some general information to get started. Radiation is often depicted by books, movies, and news media as a mysterious, deadly force. In truth, there's nothing mysterious about it at all. Radiation has been studied for over 100 years. Detection, measurement, and radiation control are extremely common events. The more the public understands, the less frightening it becomes. Indeed, radiation is a very beneficial diagnostic tool. Radiation is often spoken of using 3 units. The Rankine, or capital letter R, is a unit of exposure in air. When that exposure enters a material or tissue, we use the term rad. The rad is the energy absorbed per gram of material. The rad takes into account the type of tissue or material being irradiated. To determine the biological effect of a rad, we use the term rem. The rem takes into account the type of radiation. Conceptually, the 3 units of radiation described are entirely different. However, for the energy ranges used in diagnostic radiology, they are approximately equal. 1 Rankine equals 1 rad equals 1 rem. The standard unit of radiation protection is the millirem. 1 millirem is 1/1000th of a rem. 1 rem is 1000 millirem. Background radiation is the relatively constant low-level radiation from environmental sources such as the earth, building materials, cosmic rays, as well as naturally occurring radionuclides found in the body. The level of background radiation will vary depending upon altitude, location, and the amount of natural radioactive material in the ground. The highest known background levels recorded are in the mountains of South America at approximately 1000 millirem, or 1 rem. As you can see, most of the natural background radiation comes from radon, a heavy radioactive gas. Radon contributes to over 50% of your natural background radiation. In addition, cosmic rays, ground soil, internal radiation, as well as man-made sources contribute to approximately 360 millirem that the average person receives in the United States. There are no known proven carcinogenic effects from radiation levels in the order of magnitude comparable to background radiation. Typically, exposures received from diagnostic procedures fall well within background radiation levels. Listed below are typical background radiation levels. If you lived in New York City, you would expect to receive approximately 300 millirem per year. If you lived in Denver, Colorado, approximately 500 millirem per year. If you lived in Grand Central Station, you'd get over 500 millirem per year. This is due to the radiation found in the building products. The higher up you go in altitude, the more radiation you expect to receive. In the Andes Mountains, you'd expect to receive 1000 millirem per year, or 1 rem. You even get radiation from the things you eat. A banana will give you 1/10 of a millirem. In addition, you receive radiation when you fly in an airplane. A typical flight from Los Angeles to London, you'd expect to receive 5 millirem. Personal monitoring is used to estimate the amount of radiation received by individuals who work around radiation. It simply measures the amount of radiation to which one was exposed. The monitor offers no protection against radiation exposure. Personal monitoring is required when an individual is likely to receive more than 1/10 of the yearly occupational dose limit, which is 500 millirem to the whole body. Monitoring is also required if an individual is handling radioactive material or working in a high radiation area. It is therefore not usually necessary to monitor radiology secretaries, file clerks, and operating room personnel. Personal monitors are generally worn on the collar and positioned outside the protective apron during fluoroscopic procedures. Pregnant workers are to wear the badge at waist level to monitor fetal exposure. For individuals consistently working in areas of high fluoroscopic exposure, such as cardiac cath lab, EP, and interventional, the institution has the option to monitor their occupational exposure using alternative calculation methods that will drastically reduce the individual's effective dose equivalent, or EDE. These calculations take into account the use of protective devices such as lead aprons. This allows a physician to continue working throughout the year while staying well below the annual occupational dose limits. Your occupational dose limits to the whole body is 5,000 mg per year, lens of the eye, 15,000 mg per year, extremities, 50,000 mg per year, and to the fetus, 500 mg for the entire gestational period. We monitor for 50 mg per month. Some typical exposure levels encountered in normal occupational situations are as follows. Nuclear medicine techs should expect to receive 500 mg per year. A radiology tech, 100 mg per year. Portable chest x-ray puts out approximately 0.02 milliroentgen at 1 meter. A portable abdomen would expect to see 0.5 milliroentgen at 1 meter. Conventional fluoro procedure, around 2 milliroentgen per minute at 1 meter, and special procedures, approximately 10 milliroentgen per minute at 1 meter. As you can see, the typical occupational exposures are nowhere near the known biological effects of radiation at high doses. Eye cataracts have been seen with exposures greater than 200,000 millirads to 200 rads. Thyroid cancer has been seen with exposures to the thyroid of over 200 rads. Breast cancer, 100 rads. Sterility, 500 rads. Skin erythema or reddening of the skin, 200 rads. Leukemia has been seen with exposures of greater than 100 rads to the whole body. In addition, we've seen birth defects when the exposure is greater than 10 rads in the first trimester. Exposure from nuclear medicine patients. Patients injected with radiopharmaceuticals emit relatively small amounts of radiation. The activity for diagnostic procedures is extremely low and poses no real danger. The typical exposure from a technetium-99m sestamibi scan is less than 0.2 mR per hour at 1 meter from the patient. A thallium-201 perfusion scan is less than 0.05 mR per hour at 1 meter from the patient, and a typical bone scan using technetium-99m MDP is less than 0.1 mR per hour at 1 meter from the patient. The general precautions for occupational workers will follow 3 cardinal rules. They are time, distance, and shielding. With respect to time, it is important to work as fast as possible while x-rays are on or you are around a radioactive material source. In the case of physicians using fluoroscopy, short, quick exposures will drastically reduce exposure to everyone in the room, including the patient. A pulse fluoroscopy setting can be a strong tool in reducing exposure. Distance offers great protection for all types of radiation exposure. Radiation exposure follows the inverse square law. This means as you move twice as far from a radiation source, the radiation exposure is reduced by a factor of 4. You should stand next to the source of radiation, which includes the patient during fluoroscopy, as little as possible. Standing 6 feet away from an exam table will significantly reduce your radiation exposure. Shielding is another way to protect yourself from radiation exposure. Alpha particles are stopped by a sheet of paper. Beta particles are generally stopped by a layer of clothing. We're dealing with X-rays and gamma rays. They are stopped usually by less than an inch of lead. When performing X-ray procedures, always stand behind a protective barrier or wear a lead apron. Lead aprons typically attenuate greater than 95% of scattered X-ray radiation. Individuals consistently working in areas of high fluoroscopic use should utilize protective eyewear to reduce exposure to the lens of the eye. General fluoroscopy guidelines. Physicians and technologists should only radiate when necessary and for as short a time as possible. For example, utilize pulse fluoroscopy. In addition, automatic dose rate control should be used. Collimate the beam as much as possible. This will reduce the scatter radiation to the surrounding staff. Stand as far away as possible from the scatter radiation source. This is the anatomy being imaged. In addition, scatter on the X-ray tube side of the patient is much greater than on the image intensifier side of the patient. Wear aprons and other protective clothing as appropriate. The X-ray tube to skin distance should be kept as large as possible to reduce absorbed dose to the patient as well as scatter radiation to the surrounding staff. This is accomplished by keeping the image intensifier as close to the patient as possible. Only necessary personnel are to be in the room during the procedure. Remove all supplementary objects from the primary beam. This includes the user's hands. And finally, place the X-ray source under the table for added user safety. Portable X-ray guidelines. Your facility is most likely to have a portable X-ray device. The scatter radiation from a portable chest X-ray is less than 0.02 MR per exposure at 1 meter. The technologist is trained to announce an X-ray is to be taken. This gives staff ample opportunity to move away from the X-ray tube. Due to the low workload and minimal scatter radiation, shielding is typically not indicated during portable X-ray operation. General Nuclear Medicine Guidelines. Only physicians listed on the license may order and interpret nuclear medicine exams. Radioactive material should be used in designated areas only. No eating or drinking in radioactive materials areas. This increases the potential for ingesting radioactive material. Lab coats, syringe shields, and gloves must be utilized when handling radioactive material. Radiation areas should be surveyed and wipe tested for potential contamination. The restricted area limits are 1 MR per hour for surveys and 1000 DPM per 100 square centimeters for wipe tests. And it is important to report any unsafe conditions to the RSO immediately. Guidelines for security and engineering. Isotopes are routinely delivered to the designated area during normal business hours. For off-hour delivery, the radioactive material transporter should check in with security and be escorted to the designated area for isotope delivery. It is important to remember that only authorized personnel are to enter radioactive material storage areas. Should staff need entry to these areas, the nuclear medicine supervisor or radiation safety officer should be contacted. General Environmental Services Guidelines. Cleaning should only be performed in authorized areas. Do not enter the hot lab or other restricted areas unless authorized to do so or under direct supervision of authorized personnel. Do not empty containers bearing the radioactive label. When cleaning, conventional cleaning solvents can be used. Some facilities have mounted waste monitors. These monitors are designed to detect small quantities of radioactive material in the waste and linen. It is important to walk slowly through these detectors. At least 6 seconds is ideal. When the alarm is sounded, store the waste in the designated area. Any institution that uses radiation for diagnostic or therapeutic purposes must name a radiation safety officer, or RSO. This individual is responsible for the day-to-day safe use of radiation at the institution. All unsafe conditions must be reported to the RSO immediately. This concludes the Radiation Safety In-Service. Should you have any questions, please contact your facility RSO. Thank you very much.